Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 8, Episode 12, The Money. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I've had a little bit of a busy week, a lot of good stuff going on, so it's not bad busy, it's good busy. But in the interest of me not having a lot of time, because I've got some stuff to get done for some work things happening this weekend, let's just get into this episode, shall we? The synopsis for The Money is as follows. George finds out his parents have lots of money, but is unhappy to hear that they've decided to start spending it instead of leaving it all to him. Kramer's sleep pattern is disturbed because his girlfriend twitches too much during the night. Jerry's parents sell their Cadillac to Jack Klompus to raise money for Jerry, forcing Jerry to buy it back again. Morty Seinfeld takes a job working for Elaine at J. Peterman. This episode was written by Peter Melman. All right, our cold open is Kramer and his girlfriend in bed. They've just had sex. They've enjoyed it. And then they say goodnight. And we see a montage of them throughout the night. And the girlfriend is really disturbing Kramer's sleep because she's all over him. She's got her arm in his face. She's basically just kind of crowding him. And so much so that he falls off the bed trying to get some space from her. The actress here, I'm sure many of you recognize, is Sarah Silverman. She plays Emily, Kramer's girlfriend. And this is pretty early in her career. She is a stand-up comedian who has appeared in films like There's Something About Mary, School of Rock, and has lent her voice to Bob's Burgers for 55 episodes. I really like her as Emily. I like her in general, but I think she's cute. She doesn't really get to flex her comedy muscles too much here, but I mean, that's just how it goes for these love interest characters. They're not really written to be the funny ones, but she's super cute. And I mean, I have to say, I have to try not to focus on how much younger she is than Michael Richards, at 21 years to be exact. And I know this is nothing new. I should say that. I mean, a lot of these actresses who are cast as the love interests for Jerry, George, and Kramer, they're way younger. They're always younger. And it's just a typical thing that happens. But I think it's because she just looks so much younger than Michael Richards here. Like they just don't physically look right together. It just creeps me out. There's no other way to say it. I did find an interesting bit of trivia. Sarah Silverman revealed in an interview that Michael Richards, when she was in this episode, screamed at her on set because she kept messing up the line, "It was probably just the wind." So I found the article and I'm going to read some excerpts from it. Sarah was supposed to say it's probably the wind in response. However, she was so nervous at the time that she accidentally said it's probably the rain, much to Michael's annoyance. Well, this guy Michael Richards breaks character and just starts ripping me a new asshole, the School of Rock star said. And he points out the window and he goes, "Do you see rain in that window? Do you see rain in that window?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Then why did you say rain?" And I'm like, "It was a mistake." And he's like, "Yeah, it's not rain. There's no rain in the window. The line is wind." Sarah said that while the exchange left a lump in her throat, she just had to get through it. However, after she processed it overnight, she felt more angry about how she had been spoken to. "I was like, fuck this guy. Nobody calls him on his shit because he's Kramer from Seinfeld," she stated. The next day, while everything was being set up for a scene in Monk's Cafe, Sarah said that Michael was trying to make small talk with her, discussing where he was considering buying a new house. Finally, I just cut him off and I go, "I don't give a fuck," Sarah said, adding that her statement left her co-star stunned and resulted in him snapping out of it a little. "I think what I was saying was you don't talk to people like that and then act like nothing happened. I'm not going to be one of those people that just joins in and acts like nothing happened," she explained. That was shitty behavior, and I'll give him credit. He took it. After Sarah stood up to Michael, the pair became casually friendly, with him sometimes calling her up for advice on whether he should return to stand-up comedy. Describing Michael as a famously odd guy and very talented, Sarah admitted that in hindsight, their interaction would have probably played out a little differently had it occurred today. "I was glad I said that, even though today I probably would have said something a little more mindful and less passive-aggressive." Yeah, I thought that was really interesting and not surprising. I mean, I think he himself, Michael Richards, has admitted how uptight, he was on set, and that he didn't like when people broke or didn't know their lines. He thought it was very unprofessional. And I think that's typical for people who put so much into their own performance and they put in all this work. It's very frustrating when people aren't as prepared as you or put the same amount of work in as you. So, I mean, I'm not defending him, obviously, yelling at people and belittling them in front of the entire crew and cast, but that's how he was. And so I'm not surprised hearing this. And I'm so glad that she spoke up. And it really kind of tracks with Sarah Silverman. I mean, if you know anything about her, she does not hold back. She's very outspoken. It's what I love about her and her comedy. So yeah, good for her. I thought that was a really good story of owning your power and speaking up for yourself on a set where, let's face it, you're just a guest star, not very famous at the time, #1 comedy show. And you're standing up to one of the biggest stars at that time in the country, in the world. I mean, people worshiped him. He was Kramer from Seinfeld, the biggest show in the world. So just a great story about her standing up for herself, and it paid off. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Helen and Morty are visiting, and Jerry thinks it's because their travel miles were about to expire. But really, they came to tell him they sold the Cadillac. It's too much car, Jerry. Kramer enters and tells Jerry that his girlfriend Emily is wearing him out. Kramer, no, it's not the sex, Jerry. Jerry motions over to his parents. Oh, Seinfeld's. Helen tells Kramer how Jerry is upset because they sold the Cadillac. And Morty tells him that they sold it to Jack Klompus for $6,000. And they did that so that Jerry could have the money. They heard about that check bouncing at the bodega. Jerry tries to explain his career is fine and he doesn't need the money. But Helen read an article about Def Jam creating a problem for stand-ups. I love that part, the little clipped out article, what with Def Jam and all. And she does hear wonderful things about Bloomingdale's executive training program. And Kramer even piles on, you gave this comedy thing your best shot. Bloomingdale's could be the next wave. And Jerry just groans in frustration. Next, we're in a coffee roaster's place. George orders a pound of Arabian mocha java. Elaine is telling Jerry about her stock options as president of J. Peterman. George is not interested and goes to the can. It's just very interesting. Oh yeah, when it's your money, it's fascinating, Jerry says, sarcastically. George's coffee is ready, but he's gone to the bathroom, so Elaine pays for it. Jerry says how that's pretty strong coffee. Elaine jokes, it's PLO blend. George returns and Elaine tells him she got his coffee, and he tries to give her some money to pay her back, but she's like, oh, no, it's on me. Oh, Elaine's got to go. She's going to be late, so she exits, and Jerry goes to follow, and George stops him. You see what just happened here? What? She treated me to the Arabian mocha java. And you misinterpret this how? She's sticking it to me that she makes more money than I do. Oh, Jerry thinks, no, she was just trying to be nice. She's sticking it to me, Jerry. Sticking it! My take on this scene, not really much for Elaine here. We just learn about her stocks with Peterman as president. I do like that exchange with Jerry and just how uninterested he is in her money. But my favorite part of the scene has nothing to do with Elaine. It's one of my favorite parts of the series, really. Just Jason Alexander's delivery of sticking it. It's just such aggression and anger in his voice. It's the best. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry is planning to fly down to Florida to buy the Cadillac back for his parents without them knowing it. They think they can dump $6,000 on me. Think again. George asks Jerry what kind of money he thinks his parents have. I bet they have more than mine. Oh, come on. Your parents have money. And Jerry makes the argument that since George's parents never spend any money and they have no living expenses, he could probably inherit up to $300,000 after they die. Of course, this excites George. But Jerry points out, well, you might not see it for 20 years because they're still pretty healthy. Jerry asks about any family history. Did anyone die young? Oh, I had an aunt that died at 7. Really? Aunt Baby. There's some great bloopers of that moment, by the way. Next, we're in Elaine's office. Kramer has stopped by to chat with Elaine about his lady problems. She's not sure what to make of that. Okay. Tells her after he has sex with Emily, he doesn't want her in the bed anymore. She's throwing off my sleep. She's got the Jimmy legs. Elaine's like, what? And he shakes his leg to show her what that means. So he's like, well, maybe I should just be honest with her. Elaine clarifies. Tell her after sex you just want her out of there? Well, I'd say it nicely. Yeah, I don't think so, she says. And Kramer's like, well, I really do like this girl. Now, if we could just get past this one thing. Yeah, no. She interrupts him. I gotta tell you, you're more than just a few tweaks away from a healthy relationship. Well, you're not exactly zeroing in yourself, lady. Well, that's it for Elaine. She tells him to get out. Get out! My take on this scene, we get a rare treat here, an Elaine and Kramer scene. Can we call it a Benasamer or a Crame Ben? Doesn't really roll off the tongue like Benastanza does. I've talked before about how I think that Kramer has a very big brother quality towards Elaine. You know, he helps her out when those other dum-dums would never. So I really think it makes sense that he seeks out Elaine's advice. You know, it's something very sweet about it. Like a little sister, like, oh, I got these lady problems. I need your help. But Elaine is not helpful at all here. And I have to say, I think Kramer is right here. Like, he's like, oh, I should just be honest. And he's so earnestly trying to have this discussion with Elaine. You know, he's trying to explain how much he likes her. And I also agree with Kramer's reaction when Elaine is so insulting to him. She interrupts him, first of all, and then insults him. And I don't know, this behavior from Elaine, are we supposed to sort of glean that she's this big wig president? You know, now she's got all these stock options. She's got all this money. I don't know. Is this attitude reflective of that? You know, she's not taking any shit, so she just calls Kramer out on his bad relationship. I don't know. I don't find that it tracks very well with the character that she'd be this dismissive of Kramer. George, absolutely. But I don't know. This is a little bit lazy to me, this exchange. I think we could have had more fun with the back and forth between the two of them. This is cut off very quickly. But also, that's where we are in the series. Just really short, sort of micro scenes. In fact, there are 29 different scenes in this episode, which is a new record for the series. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Jerry covers for his secret trip to Florida and tells his parents that he's got to go to Bally's. He's covering for Carrot Top at the last minute. He's like, see, they instantly thought of me. My career is fine. Next, we're at the Costanzas. George is having dinner with Frank and Estelle, and he says he's, been thinking about the family. Tell me about Aunt Baby. Frank looks up and says she's deceased. George kind of glances up too. He asks, how did she pass? And Frank kind of gives this vague answer of internal problems. Is that common in our family? Well, your Uncle Mo, he died a young man. Also, internal problems. Estelle blames it all on that temper on Frank's side. Everyone's yelling, and then one day, they're all gone. Frank gets defensive at that. What about your side? Accusing her cousin Henny of being sickly from the moment I met her. Don't you talk about Henny! I guess you two are the lucky ones, George says. So far. Estelle asks how old Aunt Baby would be if she were alive today. She'd never make it, Frank says. Next, we're in Monk's. Kramer is having the talk with Emily about needing to sleep alone after sex, which he does enjoy. He says it's like strawberry pie. And he knows that it's not what the ladies like to hear, but without some solid sack time, he's a zombie. I don't know, she says. Oh, come on, meet me halfway. Emily tells him, you're not easy, Kramer. I know. Next, we're in Florida. Jack Klompus is wondering why Jerry is there for this unannounced visit. He tells him he wants to buy the Cadillac. You want to buy it back? Why? You got drugs hidden in the trunk? He laughs. Jerry just stares at him. I'm kidding. Well, they haggle about the price. Jack is totally trying to gouge Jerry, but they settle on $14,000. So they make the deal, but he does say he needs to drive the Cadillac the next day. Jerry's trying to write the check, but his pen is out of ink. Well, Jack busts out the astronaut pen. Still works. Next, we're in Jerry's apartment. Kramer asks the Seinfelds where Jerry is. They tell him that he's performing at Bally's in Atlantic City. Kramer picks up the phone to call the casino. He needs Jerry's shoeshine kit. He always hides it from me. He asks for Jerry Seinfeld's room. And Morty's surprised that he knows a number offhand. I used to have a problem. What do you mean he's not registered? And he starts spelling Seinfeld, but says V instead of F. Once again, Kramer doesn't know a name. Lily for Susan, Bennett instead of Bennis, and he apparently thought it was Seinfeld. He tells the person on the phone, I think you're wrong. Well, you have a lucky day too. And he hangs up. Helen asks, he's not there? No, they never heard of him. All right, next we're at a restaurant. George has taken Elaine, Helen, and Morty out for a fancy dinner. And Jerry's going to be joining them soon. Elaine thanks him. This is so nice of you. He says, well, even though he enjoys the good-natured ribbing, nothing makes him happier than spending money on the people he cares about. Elaine sort of gives a confused expression there. Then he brings out a brand new coffee maker for Elaine in exchange for the Arabian Mocha Java. She's like, George, you don't have to do this. I'm president of a big company. I can afford to buy you coffee. Morty's impressed. President? Jerry enters, and Helen tells him about Kramer's call. Well, I can't register under my real name, he says. I registered under Slappy White. The Costanzas come in. Hello, Seinfelds. George is confused. What are you doing here? We're having an upscale dinner. Estelle explains that after talking to George, they realize they may not have much time left, so they're blowing all their money. Frank is so proud of his new tie, he bends down and shows everyone. Look, George, it's a Pierre Cardin. My take on this scene, not much to the Elaine portion, but I do like her reaction, her face after George says his bit about spending money on the people he cares about. She's just so confused. Oh my God, the best part of the scene is Frank Costanza saying, Pierre Cardin, and like the way he leans forward and that smile on his face. Oh, he's so proud of his pricey tie. All right, next we have a quick scene at Emily's apartment. They've just had sexy time again. That was all right. I'll see ya. And Kramer leaves. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment. Morty is up early to do his exercise. He sneaks out of the front door and puts his apparatus on Kramer's doorknob and starts working out. And then we see Kramer, because it wakes him up, and Kramer is staring at his doorknob, just turning back and forth, and gets very freaked out. Next, we're at Jerry's apartment later, and Jerry gets a call from Jack Klompus. He had a little mishap with the car. He drove it into a swamp. Jerry is trying not to say too much on his end because his parents are right there. So Klompus tells him he needs to come down right away. All right, Jerry says and hangs up. He tells his parents, well, that was the Golden Nugget, also in Atlantic City. They heard such good things about my show at Bally's, so I'll have to repack and go. And he exits into his bedroom. Morty is suspicious. That didn't sound like the Golden Nugget. Helen is worried. What if we have to support Jerry? Morty says I'd have to go back to work. Where would you work? Maybe I should talk to Elaine. And next, we're at Elaine's office. Morty is there, and Elaine is so confused. Why would you want to work here? Well, what's not to understand? Well, for one thing, you live in Florida. He tells her he's very comfortable working out of the house. He's got a phone and a Kinko's nearby, and that his resume speaks for itself. Where's your resume? I don't have it. I'll mail you one. What kind of position did you have in mind? She asks. Well, because they sell clothes, he says, well, I sold raincoats in the garment center. And he starts sharing some story about his experience. And Elaine just interrupts him and tells him to come in the next morning. We'll find something for you to do. Morty is so excited. You won't be disappointed. What time should I come in? I'm up at 4. I could be here as early as 4:25. And then Mr. Peterman walks in. Elaine is shocked. You're back. And he walks into, I don't know, another room in the office. And Morty asks, who's Mr. Fancy? My take on this scene, we're just moving the story along here. Again, not a lot of comedy. And we see the big return of J. Peterman. So we know things are going to be changing for Elaine pretty quick. Next, we're in Emily's apartment. Emily and Kramer are in bed, and he says that he'd like to sleep over. And she says, oh, that's sweet, but I'd really prefer it if you left. She says he was right. She sleeps so much better all by herself. And you scream in your sleep. I do? And he tells her that a man was trying to get into his apartment the night before. He was jiggling the doorknob for 25 minutes. Emily's not convinced. It was probably just the wind, not the rain. But he doesn't want to sleep alone. Well, I do, Emily says. Next, we're in Florida. Jerry pulls up to Klompus at the accident. He's like, what took you so long? I live in New York. Jerry is so pissed. The car is covered in swamp mess. He opens the door and water comes pouring out along with some fish. You are such an idiot. Well, we got to clean it up. Jack's like, well, do whatever you want. It's your car. My car? You drove it into the swamp. It drove itself into the swamp. Besides, Clompus says, I think I lost my pen. And that cheers Jerry up. This might make all of it worth it. Next, we're at the Costanzas. George asks why there's a Cadillac outside the house. It's your mother's new car. You bought a Cadillac? It's a coupe d'elegance. And they got that one because Estelle refuses to drive a German Mercedes. Kramer comes out of the kitchen in his robe, drinking a cup of coffee, and George is so confused. What the hell is going on here? Well, Kramer stayed with them because he didn't want to stay alone in his place. Well, Frank tells George how he, Estelle, and Kramer have been talking, and that they're thinking about moving to Florida again because they can't spend all their money in Queens. It's low rent. You could drop $1,000 in Disney World like that. And George can't believe it. But Estelle says, well, it's either that or we stay here near you and sit on the money. What do you think, George? Next, we're in J. Peterman's office. J. Peterman is telling the group how Elaine will return to her original position at her original salary, and he will assume the president role again. And kudos to Elaine on a job done. What about my stock options? I think not, he says. He talks about a scarf that he wants to produce, and Elaine responds that for $1,000 a bolt, they can get some silk from their factory. And Morty's like, what? He can get a deal with a couple Chinamen for half that. Elaine is horrified at that term. It's Asian Americans. What? Who are you? Peterman asks. Morty introduces himself and tells him how he cut velvet for 40 years. Peterman asks Elaine, did you hire this man? Well, no, he's more like an intern at best. My take on this scene, no comedy here for JLD, just responding to the funny that J. Peterman and Morty bring. I do love how J. Peterman says, who are you? And the kudos is pretty funny as well. Okay, next we're in Monks. There's a Benestanza scene. George and Elaine are in a booth. And Elaine is sort of laying George's situation out. She's like, so if your parents move to Florida, you're poor, but happy, he says, well, obviously. And if they stay, you're rich, but obviously, he says. Oh, that's quite a dilemma, she says. And then she goes into how she has her own dilemma. No, George says. They haven't solved his problem yet. Can't move on to her. And she's like, all right, well, this is easy. Let him go. Well, what about all the money? All right, then they stay. George is so annoyed. Could you put some thought into this? Since Jerry's not there, George would like Elaine to humor him, like he does. Speaking of Jerry, she tells him about the issue with Morty at work, how he's driving her crazy. So George gives her the advice to schedule a late meeting. What does that do? These old guys are up at 4 o'clock in the morning. By 2:30, they're wiped. How did we get back on you? Elaine has to go. She exits. I got nothing out of this, George says. My take, woohoo, a Benestanza scene. It's a solid scene. This is probably the best Elaine scene of the episode. And I love the discussion here. They both need advice from the other. And Elaine could care less. She just wants advice for her problem. And I like that this is sort of a running bit with the two of them. When Jerry is out of town, these two use each other as like the Jerry surrogate. And Elaine is always messing up her part as the Jerry surrogate, according to George. And he always has to point it out. Next, we're at the Costanzas. Kramer comes into the bedroom and notices that Frank and Estelle sleep in separate beds. And Frank says, yeah, they came to an agreement years ago because Estelle's got the Jimmy arms. You can get that in your arms? Like you wouldn't believe. All right, next we're back in Florida. Jerry is still at Jack Klompus's house, and Jack's like, why are you still here? You got everything done. Well, it turns out Jerry maxed out his credit cards and he doesn't have enough cash for a hotel room. You're not thinking of staying here. Well, Jack says he's got some nerve. You didn't like that crack about the pen? I did not, Jack says. Next at the Costanzas, George tells his parents he's made the decision he'd like them to stay. Well, it's too late. They bought a condo in Del Boca Vista, and they're leaving tonight. Well, you said it was my decision. We were just being nice. Estelle asks Kramer if he'll be all right staying there alone. He says, yeah, I got Emily coming over tonight. You're letting him have a girl stay over? Well, he's not family. It's different psychologically. Next, we're in Peterman's office. J. Peterman is droning on and on about stories of when he was in Burma. And Morty is visibly annoyed. Elaine keeps prolonging the meeting, though. Please tell us more about when you were in mortal danger. Morty finally asks if they can get some food if we're going to stay here for all hours of the night. It's only 5:15, Peterman says. So he continues his story, and Morty can't take it anymore. He says, I'm done. I'll be back in the morning when he's close to done telling his story. Morty, these stories are what sell these clothes. Well, Morty disagrees. It's dim lighting and cheap fabric. That's how you move merchandise. And J. Peterman fires Morty. I never knew what I was peddling with those stupid cartoons and that paper book anyway. And Elaine is happy. My take, we're just getting some closure to Elaine's plot. It's not a lot of substance for Elaine here, but just escorting the comedy for J. Peterman and Morty. Next, back in Florida, we see a quick scene of Frank walking down the street, and he sees someone sleeping in a Cadillac. He is appalled and walks away, and we see that it's Jerry. Back at the Costanzas, Kramer and Emily are in the bedroom in the separate beds, and they have a very old married couple conversation. I'm not going to get into that. And next at Monk's, Elaine is reading from the paper. There's an article about how the J. Peterman stock soared because of the return of J. Peterman himself. Jerry says, so if you still had those stock options, and she's like, yeah. Oh, that's a shame, George says across the booth. What, are you sticking it to me? George acts all innocent. What are you talking about? I think you're sticking it to me. Jerry tries to calm her down. I'm sure George was just being sympathetic. Sticking it, she says. And George is definitely sticking it. We can see it from his face. Jerry tells her it's not her. He's practically broke. Really? No. But I did blow over $20,000 on that Cadillac. They notice George is in a really great mood, and he says he's basking in the buffer zone. The parents are in Florida. Another piece of pie here, he calls for the waitress. Elaine asks Jerry if his parents were shocked to see the Cadillac, and he says, I haven't heard from them yet. My take, great callback to the stick in it from the earlier scene. I hate to say it, but I think Jason Alexander nailed it with his delivery. It's not as funny when JLD does it, but it's still a funny moment. Ooh, I feel kind of dirty saying that I don't like JLD's line delivery. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, JLD. You know I love you. Right next, we're in Florida. Helen and Morty are wondering what they will tell Jerry. They sold their condo and are living in a trailer attached to the Cadillac. That condo was too much house. Then we cut to Estelle in Florida. Estelle tells him to stop checking the car. I saw a bum sleeping in a Cadillac the other day. Why would they break in to take a nap? They don't nap, they make it their home. They urinate in there. You're driving me crazy, Estelle says. That's it. We're going back to Queens. No, Estelle does not want to. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. I can't believe she's gone. This is so unfair. So young. So tragic. The year was 1937. Fern had just finished second grade when the unthinkable happened. Fern, wake up. Fern? Fern? Oh my God! She's not breathing! Fern's death tore her family apart. Her father blamed her mother blamed her father, but her big brother Frank, he knew the truth. Fern's problems were internal. How did he know? She told him after she died. Fern, is that you? Hi, big brother. Miss me? Coming this summer, a film that will make you terrified of 7-year-old girls. Aunt Baby. Mom and Dad can't even get out of bed, Fern. We all miss you so much. Oh, how sweet. But maybe they should have taken me to the doctor when I said my stomach hurt. Watch as Fern exacts revenge from beyond the grave. No one believed her. Not her parents, not her brother, not even her best friend, Henny. Henny. Fern? Force-feeding me your mother's tapioca pudding even though I told you it made me sick. Well, now it's your turn! In theaters this August, Aunt Baby. Nothing is creepier than little girl ghosts. And we're back. There was an inside look for this episode, and I just wanted to mention a crazy story. So the actor who played Jack Klumpus is named Sandy Barron. He was a legendary comedian. It was crazy. So when they cast him for this episode, he was extremely ill, so ill. In fact, he fell into a coma the week that they were filming the episode. One of the production assistants found him unconscious in his car when they were wondering where he was for rehearsal. So, they were busy rewriting, going, well, he's definitely not going to be able to be in the episode. But then he came out of the coma miraculously, and he still wanted to do the episode. So they delayed production for a couple of weeks to film his scenes. So they put it off for like 2 or 3 weeks so he could recover a little bit more. But it's kind of hard to believe. He is so funny in this episode. He definitely looks a little sickly. I mean, he's very, very skinny compared to when you see him in the episode with Stella, that first appearance he makes. But he's so funny. He's so incredible in this episode. It's hard to believe that he had been in a coma. So I just wanted to tell that story. And then there was a deleted scene with Elaine in her office. Morty is also in her office, like working off this little desk next to hers. And he's humming away, just being super loud. And he's calculating on this noisy machine. Like, what is it called? One of those like machines where like the receipt comes out at the whatever, it's like anyway, that's my great impression of this machine. An adding machine, whatever. You get the idea. Finally, what he's calculating is that they can save 30 cents a pair if they don't make the Prince William kids' pajamas flame retardant. I just thought that line was so funny. I mean, Prince William was so young at that time, so it's like kids' pajamas, like, wow. And then Morty says, well, Jacopo will love this. And Elaine says, you mean Mr. Peterman? No, he told me to call him Jacopo. Well, that's it. So this is clearly after the scene where George gives her the advice for the late meeting. So she says, yeah, that's great news. We shouldn't wait to tell him. We should call a meeting today. Well, what time? She says, how about 4:30? And he's like, after dinner? So that was a really cute scene. I think that would have been a good addition to this episode, just because, well, I don't think Elaine gets enough for her plot, and then it kind of rounds out a little bit this whole plot of why she needs to get rid of Morty. Like, we see that he's a little bit annoying in that meeting, but a little bit more evidence of why she's like, okay, I need to get him the hell out of here because he's just the worst. All right, now it's time to open Greg's sack lunch. Every week, our most dedicated contributor sends us a sack lunch of his thoughts about the episode. So Greg's overall thoughts, he says, this episode has a lot of potential to be great, but the piecing together of all the stories sacrifices the funniest ones for more time on the weak ones. We get some great moments, but all in all, this is just an okay episode for me, dog. Oh God, you made me say dog. Greg, come on. What is this? 2003? Yes, I do not disagree with you at all. They pack so much into this episode. I'll get more into that with my final thoughts, but we are once again on the same page. Next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, I love how Elaine buys the coffee for George and he takes it as her sticking it to him. It's one of those rare times where she isn't sticking it to him. She was honestly being nice. Everything about this plot is perfect, though. Oh, totally. I wish they played up this part of the plot even more. She's very excited about her stock options. She's talking about it with Jerry. She's in a good financial place and she's fucking proud of it. I think that's a great place for Elaine to start this episode. And then, like a beef between her and George, back and forth, that could have been enough. But again, we had to bring in all these other elements and it just muddied everything up. And you're right. She wasn't sticking it to him. She really wasn't. But that's why that line is so great too. When Jerry's like, and you misinterpret this how? Like, come on, George, he just overreacts. And I think you could argue too, there's an element of her being a woman. I'm gonna pull the sexist card here, because if Jerry did that, he wouldn't give a shit. If Kramer did that, he wouldn't give a shit. But it's Elaine. It's Elaine making more money than him. I think there's something to that. Next, Greg says, a great Elaine and Kramer scene, which we haven't had in a while, is when Kramer visits Elaine at work and she ultimately throws him out when he said she isn't exactly zeroing in on a relationship either. She does not like being called out, and I like that Kramer does it because he's usually the one singing her praises. Totally. And like I said before, I think it's justified. It's like, hey, out of all your friends, Elaine, Kramer is the one that steps up. Those other two idiots never do. They just mock you and make fun of you. And this is how you kind of repay him with just insulting him and telling him he's got a shitty relationship when he's really earnestly trying to ask for her help and explaining, I like this girl, but how do I get through this? I'm on Kramer's side with that. But yeah, she definitely doesn't like to be called out. And I'm going to stand by there. I think there's an element to this whole, she's very high on her horse because she's the president. She's got this money with the stocks. So I think there's something to that as well. That's why her attitude is such that she just feels like she can call Kramer out. It's like, no, Elaine, Kramer's the only one that's really kind of on your side in this friend group. Greg goes on to say, Elaine and George get a fantastic scene at the diner where they're listening to each other's problems, and I really wish this was longer and more of the episode. She clearly doesn't care about his issues, and he doesn't even want to hear hers. Why did they even bother meeting up? Well, I think, again, they needed their surrogate Jerry's, which they look to the other for whenever he's out of town. And I think George is like, there should be a protocol, we're not moving on to yours until we get some kind of a conclusion to mine, some kind of advice, some kind of a solution. But, once again, Elaine is breaking the protocol that he thinks in his mind should be the way where, well, I'm just going to change the subject to my thing. So I think the meetup was with good intention, but yeah, they just don't gel well when they're supposed to be the other's surrogate Jerry. Next, Greg says, the last diner scene with Jerry, Elaine, and George leads to Elaine's funniest moment when she calls out George for sticking it to her. And unlike the earlier sticking it, George absolutely is. She hates his ass. Totally. Yeah. I mean, the way he's just kind of like that little look on his face, a little smug bug. Yeah, totally sticking it to her. He's so happy. It's like, oh my God, my parents are in Florida. I've got this buffer zone. Now Elaine doesn't have those stock options. She's just like us again. It's a good day for George. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, there's so much going on with Jerry and the Cadillac that it takes away from the genius that is Benestanza and what could have been. As much as I love seeing Jack Klompus, I just didn't need to see so much back and forth with Jerry buying the car. Elaine was getting several great bits with Kramer and then George, then Morty and Peterman, and I love all of these more than anything with Jerry in Florida. And truthfully, Kramer could have been completely removed from this episode and it wouldn't have lost anything either. More Elaine and George always. I agree. Yes, I totally agree with all of that. It's conflicting because I just like you, Greg, I love Jack Klompus. And like I said, Sandy Barron absolutely kills it in this episode. Maybe the coma was good for his performance. I don't know. That sounds terrible. But yeah, I mean, I love him. I do love his performance, but I feel like this could have been lifted out and maybe done in a different episode because we had such potential with that money tension between George and Elaine. It could have just kept going back and forth. It could have been the game of the episode, like I've talked about. Let's keep kind of heightening and building on this Elaine sticking it to George and then George trying to prove that, oh, he can keep up with her kind of thing. The Florida stuff gets really tedious to me and it's just not that interesting. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but I guess I will now. Does it track with Jerry's character that he would do this? Like just out of spite, be like, hey, I'm going to buy this Cadillac back for you. Like they clearly don't want it. And I know that the whole thing is like, oh, we sold it to give you the money because we think you don't have any money. Another running bit of the series. I think that's another issue I have with it, along with just kind of, it's not that funny to me. Would Jerry do this? And not that I'm like doubting that Jerry has money, but also like he's not a world famous comedian on the show at this point. He's still just like a club comic that tours every now and then. And he lives in Manhattan. It's like, why does he have this much money? Where is this money coming from? It's not as mysterious as Kramer's income, but I don't know. It's just these little kind of dumb details that I get hung up on. I'm like, okay, he really has 20 grand to spend on a Cadillac, just like out of his pocket. Like what? I mean, bottom line, I just find it all very uninteresting. Like Rudy says from Rudy's. Was that guy Rudy? I don't know. Anyway, moving on to Greg's extra thoughts. He says, has Sarah Silverman ever aged? I swear she looks exactly the same to this day. She's much like our friend Jihan, who's also frozen in her 20s. Sarah Silverman should have been given a better appearance than this, given her comedy chops. She's asleep in most of her scenes. First of all, shout out Jihan. Yeah, you're right. It's like, Jihan, start aging already. It's so annoying. No, I agree with you. She's adorable then and still now. And that's what I meant when I was saying, like, it's disturbing how much younger she looks than Michael Richards. And that's why them as a couple just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I didn't want to say heebie-jeebies, but I couldn't come up with anything else. But you bring up a good point, Greg, where you say for her comedy chops, she should have been given more. It's interesting as I go through the episodes and highlight the female talent that's on the show. So often these women who are given no comedy, they're just very kind of flat characters. They're really just there to fill a void for a girlfriend or a teacher or some kind of a role that only serves to lob up the comedy for usually the men but maybe sometimes Elaine. And they don't get to be funny themselves. But as I'm doing research on these actresses, you learn that's like a lot of them have the background of being in improv and sketch comedy, or now they're like famous for being funny. And it's like when they're in the Seinfeld episode, they weren't given that chance. It's really interesting. And yeah, I'm totally with you, because at this point she had been on Mr. Show. She had also been on I can't remember what she'd been on before. Oh, I think it was Remote Control or Ben Stiller's show. The point is, she had been on comedies prior to being cast on Seinfeld. So they knew they were casting a comedic actress, but yet she does not get any comedy. And yes, she is pretending to sleep in most of her scenes. And finally, Greg says, Frank and Estelle are the best. And yes, I say that every damn time they show up. I love them living high on the hog as they seem so happy for once and not even bickering in the least. Frank saying his tie is a Pierre Cardin cracks me up every time. Oh my God, how could it not? I giggle like an idiot every time I see that, because I also love that the camera holds on him for like a good 2 or 3 seconds. And he's just so happy. He's just kind of like looking around. He's so happy. And I do love that you can see like kind of the top half of Elaine's head where she's like, okay, wow. I think what she's shocked about is like, I've never, ever seen these two people so happy and smiling. It is a rare thing for the Costanzas. Thank you so much, Greg, for sending in your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. It's kind of hard to choose. It's not a very fun Elaine episode. I think I'm going to have to go with her telling Kramer to get out. I just like that moment. I think it's coupled with the insult that he throws at her. Well, you're not exactly zeroing in yourself, lady. And then the get out is funny. A close second would be just how dismissive she is of George's issues with I don't know, let him go. Okay, then they stay. That's funny to me. All right, and now my final notes for the episode. This is a very Elaine light episode, as I've alluded to. We just needed her to be more involved in something. Like I've already touched on, the back and forth with her and George, with the money stuff, that tension. I mean, they teed it up in that scene at the coffee place, and then it kind of goes nowhere. So that would have been a great kind of back and forth plot between the two of them. The tension about money, even her bringing up, it's like, what is it? Because I'm a woman? Because I think that's very relevant. But also in this episode, we have the return of J. Peterman, which was a huge plot point. He's been gone ever since the first episode of this season. So this is a huge shift for the Elaine character. I just wish her plot revolved around that instead of like Morty having to get involved. Because then we could have focused on maybe like, I don't know, meetings to get J. Peterman back up to speed and Elaine having to sit through these meetings as people kind of throw her under the bus, or her trying to prop up her decisions, the bad decisions she made. Like, I think those could have been really fun scenes. Now, even though I love the parents, and like I said, I love Jack Klompus, this episode, it was so hodgepodge for me. And as I said earlier, we had 29 scenes in this episode, and it was too much. There are fun moments for sure. My favorite plot was probably George with his parents. I thought that was really funny, figuring out their money situation. But this is like one of those, like a dish that you order and it just has too many things going on. With every bite, there's like a different flavor. It's like just keeping it simpler would have helped. This episode is called The Money, so I think it would have been fun to just delve into the finances of everyone in different ways. And of course, money can get complicated with friends. And so there are just so many possibilities with just focusing on the four instead of the Cadillac and Florida and all that kind of stuff. Keep it simple, stupid. Or I'm sorry, I should say keep it simple, Seinfeld. Same acronym. And I think that's all I can say about The Money. Please be sure to follow Hot and Heavy on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Bennis Podcast. If you'd like to email me, I would love it. And you can do that at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you could leave a review and rate the podcast, that would be a big help. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.